How about a little bit of contract advice? So, I went to law school 33 some odd years ago, and many young law students and old law students struggled with contract law. Contract law always fascinated me. It seemed almost mechanical. There's a lot of concepts in contract law that don't necessarily make a lot of practical sense, but when you're talking about a contract that's going to be scrutinized and maybe end up in a courtroom, you want a contract that's going to do exactly what you wanted it to do. I have dealt with car sale contracts, construction contracts, remodeling, home renovation, this sort of stuff. I've also dealt with real estate contracts. Real estate contracts are really important because of something called the statute of frauds, which is some law that goes back, I don't know how many hundreds of years. But the statute of frauds essentially says that if a contract deals with land, it has to be in writing. And every term of the agreement has to be in writing. So if you think you're going to have some sort of thing that comes up and the people say, well, it's good, we all understand how this is going to work, we don't need to really change the contract or, for something that comes up later. Unfortunately, the answer to that is wrong answer. Because if you expect it to be enforceable, meaning you expect it to happen, you have to have it in writing. Now, in Missouri, since 1952, the law changed. The law before 1952 was that real estate agents were not allowed to write contracts because they just don't know what they're doing when it comes to contract law. And I still believe that because I've seen all sorts of real estate contracts go sideways when it never would have happened if an attorney who knew contract law had drafted it. Usually, in those circumstances, it's some sort of change. But let me back up a little bit. What you need to know about Missouri and many states is that the real estate lobby convinces the legislature to let them essentially do some basic contracts to purchase, to sell homes. And usually, not usually, always, those forms are actually written. They're drafted by lawyers. And we make them as foolproof as possible. They're fill-in-the-blank forms. And they're pretty simple, at least to an attorney who knows contract law. To real estate agents, generally all they want to do is get a deal, get it closed, and get their commission. And I understand that. They don't want to spend any money on an attorney because that'll probably cut into somebody's commission somewhere along the line. So, simple, dimple contract in Missouri. The approved forms for agents are pretty straightforward, and as long as there's nothing weird going on, they work. And they work 9.9 times out of 10. But the problems you run into is when there's something that comes up that requires sort of a one-off kind of change, an amendment or something. Now, guess what? We have an amendment form that's approved for the use of brokers and agents. But they don't understand amendment law necessarily, and they also don't understand some of these concepts of the statute of frauds, vagueness, specificity, all of these sorts of things that are extremely important when you're talking about contracts. So, what's the moral of the story? Well, personally, I think that attorneys ought to be required to review all real estate contracts just because brokers, agents, they're not lawyers. They'd like to think they know this stuff, but everyone I've dealt with, they don't. I have litigated, I've sued lots of home sellers over the years where something went wrong, whether it was a disclosure issue, maybe a leaky basement, or just something else. And I get to looking at these contracts, it's always a situation where some changes were made by the agents, and it's always screwed up. And I look at these things, and all I can think of is, this could have been avoided if somebody paid an attorney $500, $1,000, whatever it might be, to review something and properly draft a document that would address what you want and would make sure it happens, make sure it's enforceable, make sure it doesn't go sideways. So I oftentimes tell people, if you're signing a contract that involves more money than you could afford to fall out of your pocket while you're walking down the street, have a lawyer look at it. Nobody listens to me. I get people that come in with 7-figure disputes over a contract. I look at the contract, if there is one, and it's so screwed up, and all I can think of is, if these dipshits had let me look at this ahead of time, we wouldn't be here. But they don't. So let a contract lawyer look at a contract. Have a contract lawyer involved in all ins and outs, any negotiations, any changes to a real estate deal or any deal. Let a lawyer look at it to make sure that it's done properly. Because as nice as agents are at finding you houses, they're crappy lawyers, and that's just a fact. Take care, folks.